Agree with that characterization of the role I played as an advocate in the case. The school agreed to allow the case to proceed with anonymity. I have...
No, you didn't. You filed a motion that specifically sought to strip her anonymity. I have it right here. I've read it. And I've read your reasons for doing so. The school didn't like the time that the parents and Chessie filed their lawsuit. You complained that counsel filed the complaints minute before the clerk of the court's office closed on June 1st, 2016. Well, I'm sorry for you, but I don't understand why your inconvenience about the time should mean that this young woman should have to surrender her anonymity and have her life. She's a survivor of sexual assault, let's not forget. That already happened. You knew that. Why should she have to have her life further destroyed because you didn't like the timing of the filing?
Senator, I represented the school in that case. I did not represent the Prout family. I understood what they went through. The school felt that the request to restrict the lawyers from trying the case in the media was
3 reasons why we love this crossfire back on 10. First off,
now it's time for lefties losing it, and fresh from calling half the country human.
You are looking totes delicious.
The latest group, which could be as large as 2,000 migrants, follows at least 2 others just this month, with some saying they're coming now because they're worried about what will happen after the November election.
So a large caravan of asylum seekers is headed towards the U.S. border, traveling north on foot through Mexico. And for months, we've heard that the border is now more secure than ever, with new restrictions in place, not only to limit crossings, but to restrict who can seek asylum to only those who come in through an official point of entry. And that makes the purpose of this caravan quite strange. Why would thousands of people journey to America if they can't stay once they arrive, unless their goal is to arrive in a sanctuary city like New York?
Mexico newspapers report at least 4,000 migrants are already on the move, and thousands more are leaving other Mexican cities. This, as many fear asylum in the U.S. may be cut back.
well, it's probably manufactured. It's somebody in the organized crime level, or maybe one of these cartels is saying, hey, this is the time to come. There's also an interest of the would-be migrants that are coming, that they think that things are going to change.
This Venezuelan migrant saying whoever wins should not close the doors to us and should give us support because we are all going through a bad time. He, like so many others, fleeing an oppressive government and looking for a better future.
New York City has spent more than $5 billion on the migrant crisis. The city projects combining the last 2 years, and this fiscal year, it's already spent $2.3 billion on just housing for migrants, with much of that going to hotels.
We know from the history of immigration enforcement in the interior that people are allowed to come into the United States under sometimes a specious asylum claim, and they don't want to be found by authorities after that. So previous to all these sanctuary cities in the United States, people who got arrested were the majority of people who were then deported. Now we're upwards of 10 million in the last 3 years. It's going to be a very difficult challenge. Earn cash, not coins, like...
So as a large group of people treks towards the southern border, some are wondering if there's more going on here than meets the eye. But what nobody's talking about is this is the exact scenario leaders of sanctuary cities like New York have been dreading for months, because they've been doing victory laps lately, congratulating themselves on what a great job the city's done handling its asylum crisis. For example, in New York, about 4,000 people a week would arrive seeking shelter, and now that number is down to about about 700, which makes it look like this crisis could be winding down. And this 75% reduction in arrivals mirrors the 78% reduction in border crossings achieved over the last few months. And even though this is a recent development, the reduction in asylum seekers has caused the city to begin tearing down some of its more controversial tent shelters, like the facility on Randall's Island, which was so large it could house around 3,000 people, but was so poorly run that gang members had taken it over and were using it as a base for their criminal operations. But gangs and shelters, that's only one of the many issues this large caravan full of people could possibly unbalance. And it certainly isn't the main issue the city's concerned about, because although most of the 212,000 asylum seekers who come here did not do so to join gangs or live lives of crime, elected officials and activists welcomed them off buses into our shelter system with the promise of a new beginning. A new beginning which ends in 1 or 2 months after they get evicted because the shelters are over capacity. Plus, the job market for asylum seekers is so bad, many of them have no way to earn a living or rent apartments of their own and are now sadly living in tents down by the river. And even with this recent decline in border crossings, our shelter population is still sitting stagnant at around 60,000 individuals, revealing that, if anything, our asylum crisis here is far from over. But the real reason this large caravan full of individuals is of concern for our leaders here in New York is because if a whole bunch of new folks show up and we've torn down our shelters, we're just going to have to set them right back up, which could mean facilities like the violence-plagued Randall's Island shelter stay open for a lot longer than anyone had hoped, because New York's extremely generous right-to-housing requirement mandates that they give anyone who asks a place to stay, something that's especially important for the thousands fleeing poverty south of our border right now, who, as you're about to see, are being deceived into believing that with the help of gang members and cartels, they too can have their shot at the American dream. And speaking of cartels and gang members, they're earning so much money from the crisis at our border that they've got every reason to try and subvert recent security measures there. And by doing so, people will be forced to make their way to sanctuary cities like New York. So, with a large number of people on their way to the United States headed for the southern border, we could see a surge in arrivals at bus terminals like this in New York if people manage to use cartels and gangs to get them around recent restrictions that have been implemented over the last couple of months. And the reason these cartels and gang members have a new business opportunity on their hands is because the border is very different today than it was a year ago. Recently implemented restrictions means the number of daily allowed crossings is a lot lower than it used to be. And sadly, many folks in a very desperate situation can't wait indefinitely at the border. They're running low on resources, and they're turning to the criminal underworld for faster passage into the country. And sadly, the criminal underworld doesn't want to lose money because of new restrictions from some government like the U.S. government. There's just too much money at stake for them.
So it's long been a misunderstanding of sorts that the Mexican cartel stays over in Mexico. They don't fire on or attack U.S. law enforcement because it's bad for business. But there has been basically a war within the Sinaloa cartel, and that prompted this alert that we actually obtained that cartel operatives and actually.
So it unfortunately looks like things are about to get a lot more dangerous at the U.S. border, because these cartels, there's recently been infighting among them, and the way that they handle U.S. law enforcement is about to change. Prior to this recent power struggle, the cartel was content to make money off smugglers and gang members accessing the border through its territory. But now, due to recent increased border security, the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol agents, they're doing more, and they're also getting help from their counterparts in Mexico. So there's way more law enforcement along these routes than there used to be. And that is what's costing the bad guys a lot of money, because they cannot ferry people through the border around our restrictions so that they can then make their way wherever they'd like in the country. Now, the cartel in question here that is undergoing an internal factional dispute, it's the Sinaloa cartel, and that name might not mean much to you, but it's actually the same cartel that was being run by El Chapo, who we all remember, one of the most dangerous people on the planet. His sons took over after him, and now there's this internal squabbling over who should be in charge of this and who gets to control what territory. And unfortunately for our border guards, their lives are now at risk because some of the members fighting for control over this dangerous group want to change how they interact with law enforcement. So we're not just witnessing fighting over who gets to run this gang of criminals. We're also witnessing fighting over who controls access to the U.S. border in general. Because whoever controls access to the U.S. border, that's the gang. That's the group that's going to get paid when smugglers and other people want to access it. And I didn't know this, but apparently smuggling people into the country, it's a $13 billion a year industry. That's a lot. And that explains a lot why these cartels are so well funded and so heavily armed and so dangerous. They're making billions off of this every single year. And now the fear is that a reaction to increased border restrictions and an upcoming presidential transition period may cause many people to think that this is their last chance to enter the country, and there might be a surge of activity at the border that these cartels are going to take advantage of. And look at this, these cartels are actually using drone disruptors to blind border patrol agents while they're trying to keep people safe and secure the border at the same time. This is a very sophisticated operation they've got going on. It's almost like a paramilitary group operating right there on the very outskirts of America's doorstep, offering people their chance to come into the country and achieve something not possible in the dangerous places many of them have fled. And now the fear is that if these criminals decide to turn their full attention against the U.S. border right now while it's in a state of flux, all of the recent security gains and victories that have recently been achieved could be in jeopardy.
Attention all seniors.
So the reason that the situation at the border is so contentious right now is because all of the security we're witnessing relies on three different parties to achieve. First, you've got the Customs and Border Patrol. Second, you've got the Mexican government. And third, you've got how willing these gangs are or aren't to interact with the other two. But these caravans that are on the way right now, they've got to travel through Mexico. And that's got some saying that the Mexican government could be doing more to help out with securing the border from their end. Because the only way these dangerous gang members and criminals can play on people's fears is if they've got the ability to do that from where they pick these people up until when they reach the border itself and then charge them money to get through it.
What do you make